Greetings, interwebs. About a year ago, I started tracking my personal finances with GnuCash, a free, open-source, double-entry accounting system available for Windows, Mac, and Linux. One of the downsides of this otherwise excellent program is that it has a somewhat steep learning curve. In the tutorial, I'm going to show you how to set up your accounts and budget with a sort of virtual envelope system. If you're familiar with the envelope system proposed by some finance experts, it's a system where you actually have physical cash and put it in physical envelopes. So if you have an envelope for your food budget, you would take several $100s, put it in the envelope for your food budget, and then you would pay for food out of that envelope. And it's a way to make sure you're not spending money you don't have. In this situation, we're going to be developing virtual envelopes, which have several advantages over real envelopes. So let's start out by creating a new account. So we're going to here to File, New File, and now this new setup, we can pretty much just stick with the defaults unless you're doing something fancy, in which case you probably don't need to be watching this tutorial. Here, instead of common accounts, which is something you may well want to start with, I'm just going to start with a simple checking account. So I can show you adding some accounts, and so we just don't have as many to deal with, so it's easier to see what's happening. You can rename them here if you want. And here we go. And it wants us to save it. So let's call this example 4. Alright. So now we have these different accounts. You use arrows with a sub account so you can expand them. And we need to create a few more. So let's start out with our current assets. Well, under here we have a checking account. We probably want also a savings account, so while I have current assets selected, I'm going to click New, and that will put a savings account underneath the current assets header, and I'm also going to add a cash account. When you are creating these for yourself, you will probably want to start off with an initial, so here if I go to Edit, I can see, I guess it doesn't show it to me once I created it. Oh, I'll show you the next account I create. Underneath of checking account, we're going to create our virtual envelopes. So New, and let's create one for bills, and now you can see here the opening balance tab. You'll probably have a starting balance in your checking account, so you'll want to fill that in. Here I'm just going to leave it as 0. And now you can see I have sub accounts under my checking account. So I'm going to add bills, I'm going to add car. Let me just pause this recording while I add a few more here. Alright, so now you can see we have bills, car, food, liability, miscellaneous, rent, and unallocated. And we're going to go over these in more detail. I want to add one more account here underneath of car. I'm going to add an insurance account. And the reason I want to do that is because insurance is something you frequently pay on a, every 6 months, every 3 months basis. You want to be saving up for every month. And anything I have to save up for, I want a dedicated envelope for that. Now we need expense accounts, and one of the things I really like about the system is I can have varying levels of granularity for my expense accounts and my assets, and I'll get into more what that means in a minute here. So expenses, I'm going to add bills, car, food, rent, miscellaneous. Now expand this and we can see these. Now up here we only have one envelope for bills, So we can save up for all our bills in one envelope, but we might want to keep track of how much each different bill is costing. So we're going to put some sub accounts underneath our bills expense account. So I'm going to select bills, hit new, and we're going to go with electric, internet, and phone. And now we can see those. Underneath car, well, I have insurance, which matches up here. I'm also going to put gas and repairs. You can see these here. Food, I like to keep track of groceries and eating out separately. Miscellaneous will leave, and rent will leave. Income, I like to keep track of the income from my regular job, which is called job. That's a salaried income in one account, and then any other miscellaneous incomes I put in a miscellaneous account, such as gifts or short-term, small jobs, things like that. We also need one more top-level account. To create a top-level account, here, under Parent Account, scroll up to New Top-Level Account. And you can select the account type. We're going to want liability. And let's call this liability. Underneath liability, let's add a credit card. So we have a Visa. And select credit card, and I should have up here for cash, I should have selected, oops, edit, a cash for the type. Alright, so now we have our current assets, under which we have our checking account with all our virtual envelopes. Our equity here is really just for opening balances until you get to more complicated things, so we could ignore that for now. Expense accounts, which you can see are more granular. We have tracking 3 different bills even though we only have one bill's envelope. So I can see how much I'm spending on electric and internet and phone separately while I save up for them all together. Now, let's say we have some income. So let's say we got paid last month on the 30th, and let's just call this salary. And now I'm going to do something that will make life a lot easier. I'm going to do something called a split transaction. Now at first they take some getting used to. It took me a while before I really understood what was happening. Hopefully I can speed that up for you. Here, when you have a split transaction, you're going to be doing a transaction from and to possibly multiple accounts on each side. More commonly from one account to multiple accounts, or from multiple accounts to one account, but you can do from and to multiple accounts. So when you look over here, this says income job. Alright, so that is saying that these 2 columns are going to deal with this account. On a regular transaction, these 2 columns always deal with whatever account I have open here. Now this happens to be the same thing, but on our next line it won't. So we're going to say I got $1,000. Oh, I didn't mean to hit enter there. Let me go back up and hit split again. And now you can see we have our income job. I'm actually just going to restart. So if you ever want to just remove it, an entry, just click it, hit delete. Delete transaction. Okay, let's do it again. Salary, split, and I'm hitting tab to navigate between the fields. So income 1,000. Now I want to hit tab, or you can click, but tab will automatically give you a new line. Now I want to take that $1,000 and split it between my various expense accounts. Now if I type EX, it'll auto-complete to expenses, and then I can go down and select which expense accounts I want it to go to. So let's I'm sorry, not expense accounts. I want it to go to my assets, my checking accounts, my virtual envelopes. So let's start with rent. Let's say rent cost me $400, okay? And remember, these two columns are referring to the account that's listed here, not necessarily the account that's listed here, because we're doing a split transaction. The side, the column that you choose to put the transaction value in is probably one of the most complicated concepts, simply really because of naming conventions. You will notice that I changed the labels at the top here to debit and credit. Now you can have GnuCash either call them debit and credit, which is what accountants use, or you can have them call it like what we had before. If I go to preferences, and say accounts, use formal accounting labels. So here it says charge and income, use formal accounting labels, debit and credit. What you really need to know is that debit and credit do not mean decrease and increase. Debit and credit mean left and right. Why accountants decided that we needed two new words for left and right, I don't know. But with a double entry accounting system, you always have to have the values in the left column summing to equal the values in the right column. And when you think of debits and credits, you would normally think, well, if I credit something, it goes up, right? Like I get a credit on my account. That's not how accounting terms work. So typically, with an income account, you will put the income in the right or the credit column. So when you credit an income account, it goes up. But when you debit an asset account, it also goes up. So try to just think of it in terms of right and left column. So here on the right, we have $1,000. Now we need the left column to add up to $1,000. Well, we had $400 in rent, and I'm tabbing through. And what else do we have that we need to pay? So let's say bills, okay? And for bills, we're going to put $100, okay, in our envelope. And now I hit tab again, and you see now it pops up this number down here, so that this column adds to 1,000. We're just going to keep kind of eating away at that number. Sorry, not expenses. Assets, car, and let's say we put $50 toward a car. Insurance, put $100 toward insurance. Food, so $250. And miscellaneous, we'll go with 100. Now if I hit enter, it completes that transaction. If I hit enter again, twice, it will minimize that transaction. Now if we go over and look at our accounts, we can see our values shown up here. Now something, the autocomplete features that GnuCash has are really handy. So let's say I got paid again, let's say on the 25th. Now I start typing the name, I hit tab, it redoes the entire transaction, so I can see it by hitting split, and you can see the 25th, it just copied everything, which makes the transaction very easy to add. And then you can go back and edit values if you want to. Save transaction. So now we want to actually spend some money. So let's start out by paying rent. Alright, and let's say we had to pay rent on the 1st. Rent, tab, and so right now I'm not in a split transaction. So that means that this account is one end of what's happening in this line. So I'm going from rent, my asset, see if I hover my mouse it pops up asset, current assets, checking account, rent. And the other end should be my expense account for rent. So here. And I'm going to pay $400. Oh, wrong column. $400. So you can see that now there's a withdrawal of $400, which in accounting terms is a credit to my asset account. And then if we go to my expense account, rent, we have a debit to my expense account. But you can see the labels the GnuCash has here are expense and in this case rebate, so it's easy to see this goes with expense. And you will probably want to leave these labels on at least when you're starting out. When you're doing split transactions, I prefer the credit and debit labels since the easier labels don't really apply anymore. Like I said, just think of it as left and right. Alright, so now we're done with the rent. So now let's do bills. Bills, we want, say we paid bills, so we pay all our bills on the 20th. And I'm going to do another split transaction. And I'm going to tab across, and we're going to do electric. And here, I could go ahead and add up all the amounts and put that first, but it's easier to let the software do that for me. So I'm going to start out with my expenses, electric, and I want to put the amount of my electric bill here in the left column. Tab over. We're going to do internet, expenses, internet, and let's say internet was $25. Now here, it popped this up to match that, but we don't want that there, so we're going to just backspace that. Phone, expenses, phone, let's say $35. Again, backspace. Now, we know that that is the total amount. So I have these three coming expense accounts. Now I need this side to come out of my bills asset account. Hit enter again, and you can see I withdrew $98 from my bills virtual envelope account. And if I go down here and look at my expense accounts, I can see that they were charged. Let's go to car. So let's say we got some gas, alright? Gas, expenses, car, gas, and let's say we spent $25. Now let's say a few days later, go forward, I'm using my plus and minus keys on the keyboard to run through the dates. And let's say we get gas again. Now if I hit tab, it'll auto-complete, but let's say this time we had $30. Alright, now we see here this 5. It's red and surrounded by parentheses. That means it's a negative, so our account went negative here. If you're using physical envelopes, that's not possible because there simply isn't money in there. But here, we can go negative. So what you're essentially doing is borrowing money from your other accounts, from your other virtual envelopes. Because it's really this number here that has to stay positive. As long as this number is positive, I mean, you're okay. Hopefully, most of these numbers also stay positive most of the time, but if you need to temporarily borrow during the course of the month, that can be a convenient feature. If we go back to car, I say, okay, well, let's say it's near the end of the month, and I say, I have extra money in food. I did not spend as much money in food as I thought I was going to, but I overspent on gas. So let's just transfer some money from food to gas. And so I'm in my, well, actually food to car, right? So I'm transferring to my envelope, not to my expense account. Right now I'm in my car asset account. So I'm going to transfer from my food asset account $10. So now you can see, well, I went negative there, but then I added $10, so I was positive again, and then I got another 50 from the following month's salary. So let's close car, save, make sure you save frequently. Also make sure you start keeping track of your receipts if you aren't doing that. It's much easier to do this if you have a whole pile of receipts than trying to remember what you spent. It's surprisingly easy to forget what you spent money on. Now, let's go to miscellaneous. So we can have, something like, say I bought books, alright? Expenses. I can also hit my colon key, and that will go to the next thing, and then I can start M, and it'll autocomplete to miscellaneous. And let's say I spent $30 on books. Now let's say I bought a gift. So let's say I bought a box of chocolates. Chocolates. If I can spell chocolate. Now let's say I realize I want to keep track of the amount of money I'm spending on gifts, but I don't have an account for that. So I could stop, go make an account, come back, but that's kind of a pain. Instead, I'm going to start out typing expenses, hit colon, and then type gifts. Hit tab, and it'll ask me if I'd like to create a gifts expense account. Hit yes, defaults are fine, and let's say I spent $15 on that box of chocolate. So now we've just created a new account. And you can see that account right there, $15. So let's talk about a few of our other asset accounts. Let's talk about unallocated. Some people don't really feel there should be an unallocated account, that everything should end up in one of these other accounts, and that's why you have a miscellaneous account for the things that don't. I find the unallocated account useful for one thing specifically. If I have a short-term thing I want to save up for, so for example a trip that's going to cost a few $100s, but I don't want to create a dedicated account for just that one-time trip, because then I have to keep that account around forever. You can't go delete accounts because everything is intertwined. Everything in that account has another half in another account, which then connects to other accounts. So you can't really delete accounts. So I don't want a bunch of one-time use accounts. So I use this for temporary savings. The other account here is our liability, and that comes to the question of, well, how do I deal with credit cards? Credit cards are great so long as you don't abuse them, but they add this kind of layer between your checking account and what you're spending money on. And when I first started, I tried to use true numbers. I tried to put everything I spent on my credit card in my credit card account, and then I would pay it off. But then I realized when I was trying to do this envelope system, well, paying off the credit card from each individual envelope is going to be just a pain, and I didn't want to do that. So what I decided is that only the times that I'm going to be carrying an expense across months will I add it to my Visa account. So let's say I made a large expense. So let's say I bought a computer. For and expenses, let's say miscellaneous. I don't have another account for that right now. And let's say I spent $1,000. So now, if you look at my accounts, we see I have $1,000 here. What that means is when I go to pay off my credit card each month or each week or however often you want to do it, if you can't pay off the full credit card and you have this carrying balance, you want to pay it off to that amount. So, let's say I had this plus another, $500 or $600 from paying rent and groceries and gas and all of that. I would pay off all the amounts above $1,000, and then that would allow me to check that my number here matches my checking account in my bank. And that's something you need to do every time you do accounts to make sure that your numbers here reflect what you actually have in your bank. So what we're going to do is then save up to pay off that credit card in my liability account. Now if you're paying interest, you probably want to pay it off as soon as possible, so you're not going to keep stuff in here for a long time. But sometimes, you get a new card, you get a year where you don't have to pay interest, so you can just save it up in here, it's not a big deal, and then transfer it over when you want to pay off your card. And so that way the Visa or your credit card is just kind of a transparent layer between you and your checking account. And I think that's everything I wanted to talk about today. If you guys have any questions, put them in the comments below. And good luck tracking your finances. Oh, there is one other thing I should mention, is reports. You can generate reports, but that's a topic for another time.